The UES Valiant dropped through the atmosphere of Kepler 442b like a falling star, its engines screaming as Tom Bradley fought to control their descent. The detention camp grew larger on the main screen until individual buildings and guard towers became visible. Captain Lisa Morgan gripped her command chair as the ship shuddered from atmospheric entry. "Touchdown in 30 seconds, Tom announced, his voice steady despite the violent shaking. "Hope everyone remembered to buckle up." The Valiant hit the ground in the center of the camp with a thunderous crash that shook the earth for miles around. Dust and debris flew in all directions as the ship's landing struts dug deep furrows in the packed dirt. Emergency alarms began wailing throughout the facility as Vorthan guards stumbled out of their barracks, confused and disoriented. Lisa was already on her feet before the ship stopped moving. "Sarah, deploy all security teams. Jake, start broadcasting surrender demands in Vorthan. Tell them we have the camp surrounded and they have 60 seconds to lay down their weapons." It was a complete bluff. The Valiant carried maybe 40 security personnel against a camp with several hundred guards, but Lisa was counting on shock and confusion to level the odds. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Davis led the first wave of Marines down the ship's ramps, their weapons ready and their movements sharp and professional. The Vorthan guards had never seen humans before, but they had heard the stories. Beings from a death world, evolved from predators, trained from birth for violence. The first Vorthan guard to see Sarah's team dropped his weapon and ran. The second one tried to raise his rifle, but Sarah's squad moved like a pack of wolves, faster and more coordinated than anything the guards had ever faced. Within minutes, the camp's command center was under human control. But Lisa's real attention was on the prisoners. Thousands of Zilani huddled in the camp's barracks, their natural glow dimmed by months of captivity and poor treatment. Many were sick. All were frightened, and none of them understood what was happening. Elder Kale's voice came over the ship's communication system, speaking in the Zilani language to calm his people. "Do not be afraid. The humans have come. The Deathworlders are here to take us home." The evacuation began immediately. Human medical. Teams moved through the barracks, treating the wounded and identifying those too sick to move quickly. Engineering crews rigged temporary shelters around the Valiant's cargo bays, creating space for thousands of refugees. "Captain," Jake reported from his station, "I am reading massive activity from the Vorthan fleet. They have finished destroying the asteroids and they are starting to wonder where we went." Lisa nodded grimly. She had known this moment would come. The diversion had bought them time, but not much. Soon the Vorthans would realize what had happened and come looking for them. "How long do we need to evacuate this camp?" she asked. Sarah's voice came over the intercom from somewhere in the camp. "At least 2 hours to get everyone aboard safely, maybe 3 if we want to do it without casualties." "We do not have 3 hours," Lisa replied. "Jake, signal the New York and Atlanta. Tell them we need immediate assistance." Even as she gave the order, Lisa knew it might not be enough. The 2 ships racing toward them would help, but they were still outnumbered by the Vorthan fleet. What they needed was something the enemy would not expect. That was when Elder Kale appeared on the bridge, escorted by one of Sarah's Marines. The old Zilani looked around the human starship with wonder in his large eyes, his skin patterns flickering with amazement and gratitude. "Captain Morgan," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "my people call you the Miracle Bringer. How can we ever repay such kindness?" Lisa studied the alien leader for a moment, then made a decision that would change everything. "Elder, how many of your people are still free on this planet?" "Perhaps 2,000 scattered in hiding places across the world. Why do you ask?" "Because we cannot evacuate everyone from just this camp, let alone all the camps on the planet. But your people know this world better than the Vorthans do. If we can give you weapons and training, can you fight to free the other camps?" Kale's patterns flickered with uncertainty. "Captain, I told you before, we are not warriors, we do not know how to fight." "Then we will teach you," Lisa said firmly. "The universe is full of bullies like the Vorthans. If your people want to stay free, you will need to learn to defend yourselves." What followed was the strangest military training session in Galactic history. Human Marines spread across the camp, teaching peaceful aliens how to use weapons and basic military tactics. The Zilani were quick learners, their natural intelligence adapting rapidly to concepts they had never needed before. Meanwhile, the evacuation continued. Thousands of prisoners were loaded aboard the Valiant, and temporary shelters were erected around the landing site. Human medical teams worked around the clock to treat the sick and wounded, but time was running out. The Vorthon fleet had finally realized that the asteroid attack was a diversion and began searching for the real threat. It would not take them long to find a human starship sitting in the middle of one of their prison camps. "Contact bearing down from orbit," Jake announced. 3 Vorthon destroyers, ETA 15 minutes. Lisa looked around the camp at the thousands of aliens who were finally free but not yet safe. They needed more time, and there was only one way to get it. "Elder," she said to Kale, "are your people ready to fight for their freedom?" The old alien looked at his fellow Zilani, many now holding human weapons and wearing determined expressions that had never been seen on their faces before. "Yes, Captain, we are ready." Lisa activated the ship's communication system. "Attention Vorthon vessels, this is Captain Lisa Morgan of the United Earth ship Valiant. You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately and cease all hostile actions against the Zilani people." The response came quickly, filled with arrogant fury. "Human ship, you are trespassing in Vorthon space. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Lisa smiled coldly. "Vorthon Commander, you picked the wrong species to threaten. We are humans from Earth, and we do not surrender. We do not retreat, and we do not abandon people who asked for our help." The battle that followed would be remembered throughout the galaxy as the day the Deathworlders announced their presence to the universe. The Valiant, supported by the arriving New York and Atlanta, fought a running battle with the Vorthon fleet while the evacuation continued below. But the real surprise came when the newly armed Zilani resistance launched coordinated attacks on Vorthon installations across the planet. Aliens who had been pacifists for thousands of years proved that desperation and proper training could turn anyone into effective fighters. War Commander Thex watched his perfect conquest fall apart around him. His communication networks were down. His ground forces were under attack from enemies who seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts. And now 3 human warships were teaching his fleet what real space combat looked like. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we are receiving surrender demands from 17 different detention camps. The prisoners have somehow armed themselves and taken control." Thex stared at his tactical display in disbelief. In less than 6 hours, his entire occupation force had been destroyed by a handful of human ships and a bunch of civilian aliens who were not supposed to know how to fight. "How is this possible?" he demanded. His communications officer looked up nervously. "Sir, I am monitoring human tactical communications. They appear to be teaching the local population military tactics in real time. The humans are not just fighting us themselves. They are teaching others how to fight us." For the first time in his military career, Thex felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of death in battle, but fear of an enemy that could turn victims into warriors just by showing up. The evacuation of Kepler 442b took 3 days. When it was over, every Vorthon soldier and ship had been driven from the system. The surviving Zilani had their world back, along with weapons, training, and most importantly, the knowledge that they could defend themselves. Elder Kale stood with Captain Morgan in the ruins of what had once been the Central Library. Around them, Zilani workers were already beginning the process of rebuilding, but this time they included defensive positions and military installations in their plans. "Captain," Kale said, his patterns glowing bright with hope for the first time in months, "what happens now? Will you stay to help us rebuild?" Lisa shook her head. "You do not need us for that, Elder. You never did. You just needed to remember that sometimes peace has to be defended with strength." She looked up at the stars where other worlds might be sending out desperate messages into the void. "Besides, we have work to do. Word is getting out across the galaxy about what happened here. I have a feeling we are going to be getting more calls for help." As the human ships prepared to leave, they left behind more than just weapons and training. They left behind hope. Hope that the galaxy did not have to be ruled by the strongest and most ruthless. Hope that somewhere among the stars, There were warriors who would come when the innocent called for aid. The age of human intervention had begun, and the universe would never be the same. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the universe changed forever. He sat in his captain's chair on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the stars through the main view screen. His ship was 3 days out from Earth on a routine patrol mission. Nothing exciting ever happened on patrol missions. Then the communications console started beeping. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Lisa Chang from her station, "we are receiving a transmission. It is coming from outside our solar system." Jake nearly choked on his coffee. "Outside the system? Are you sure it is not from one of our deep space probes?" "No, sir," Lisa said. Her voice was getting excited. "This is definitely not from us. The signal is using mathematical patterns we have never seen before, and Captain, it is very strong. Whatever sent this message has technology we do not understand." Jake stood up and walked over to Lisa's station. Around the bridge, the other crew members were stopping their work to listen. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake, the tactical officer, moved closer. Chief Engineer Maria Santos looked up from her engine reports. "Can you decode it?" Jake asked. "I am trying, sir. The computer is working on it now." Lisa's fingers flew over her keyboard. "The signal seems to contain some kind of universal language system. Wait, I think I am getting something." The bridge speakers crackled and then a voice spoke. It was obviously not human, but the words came through in English. "This is Admiral Zephyr of the Galactic Coalition. We are sending this message to any intelligent species in the Terra system. We are facing a threat that could destroy all life in our galaxy. We need your help." The bridge went completely quiet. Jake felt his heart start beating faster. This was first contact. Real first contact with aliens. Every person on Earth had wondered if this day would come, but no one expected it to happen like this. "Keep recording everything," Jake ordered, "and send an emergency signal to Earth Command immediately." The alien message continued. "We have observed signs of civilization in your system. We know your world is dangerous, and that your species must be very strong to survive there. The enemy we face is called the Vracath Swarm. They have destroyed dozens of our worlds and killed billions of our people. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They only consume." Lisa looked up at Jake with wide eyes. "Sir, they are asking for military help. They think we are warriors. Are we?" Ryan asked quietly. Jake thought about that question. Humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years. They had weapons that could destroy planets. They had armies trained to fight in any environment. But they had never thought of themselves as the galaxy's warriors. The message went on for 20 more minutes. It included detailed information about the Vracath Swarm, their biology, and their tactics. It showed star maps of the systems they had destroyed. It contained technical data about coalition military capabilities and their failures against the swarm. When the message ended, the bridge was silent for a long moment. Then Jake spoke. "Lisa, how long will it take to get this to Earth?" "Already done, sir. I sent a compressed copy as soon as the message started." "Good. Ryan, what do you think about their military situation?" Ryan studied the tactical data on his screen. "It looks bad, sir. These coalition forces seem to focus on defense and non-lethal weapons. They have good shields and energy systems, but no real offensive power. This Vracath swarm just overwhelms them with numbers." "And what about their enemy?" Jake asked. "The Vracath are basically space insects that eat everything," Ryan said. "But look at this data. Their ships are biological. Their weapons are acid and teeth. They rely on swarming tactics and their ability to digest energy shields." Maria spoke up from her engineering station. "Captain, their technology is incredible. Look at these power readings. They have energy sources we cannot even imagine, but they use it all for defense and communication." Jake nodded slowly. He was thinking about Earth's military capabilities. Humans had nuclear weapons, kinetic bombardment systems, chemical explosives, and projectile weapons that could punch through almost anything. They had developed these weapons because Earth was a dangerous place where you had to fight to survive. "Sir," Lisa said, "we are getting a response from Earth Command. Admiral Sullivan wants to speak with you immediately." The main screen changed. to show Admiral Patricia Sullivan sitting in her office at Space Force headquarters. Her face was serious, but Jake could see excitement in her eyes. "Jake," she said, "please tell me this is not some kind of joke." "No, ma'am," Jake replied. "We have confirmed alien contact. They are asking for military assistance against a hostile alien species." Admiral Sullivan leaned back in her chair. "I have been reading the message data. These coalition aliens seem peaceful, almost too peaceful, but this Vracath swarm sounds like a real threat." "What are your orders, Admiral?" "Stand by, Captain. I am calling an emergency meeting with the President and the Joint Chiefs. This decision is too big for the military alone." The screen went dark, and Jake was left with his crew and 1,000 questions. Were they really going to make contact with aliens? Were they going to fight in an interstellar war? What would this mean for humanity? 2 hours later, the screen lit up again. This time it showed the White House Situation Room. President Helen Harrison sat at the head of the table, surrounded by military leaders and advisors. "Captain Morrison," the president said, "you have given us a lot to think about. We have been analyzing the alien message for the past 2 hours. Our scientists confirm that this appears to be genuine." "What is your assessment of the situation, ma'am?" Jake asked. General Tony Rodriguez of the Space Force answered, "We believe this is both an opportunity and a test. If we help these coalition aliens, we establish ourselves as a major power in galactic politics. If we refuse, we might face the Vracath alone someday." "What about the risks?" Jake asked. "There are many," admitted Dr. Sarah Kim, the president's science advisor. "We know nothing about these aliens except what they told us. We could be walking into a trap. Or worse, we could win this war only to find out we are now the most dangerous species in the galaxy." Admiral Sullivan appeared on a smaller screen. "Jake, I have been looking at the military data. Our weapon systems are completely different from anything the Coalition uses. We developed kinetic weapons, explosives, and nuclear devices because we had to fight each other on a world full of predators." "And?" Jake prompted. "And I think we might be exactly what they need. The Vracath have never faced weapons like ours. They have adapted to energy weapons and defensive systems. But a nuclear torpedo or a railgun round? That might be something completely new to them." President Harrison leaned forward. "Captain Morrison, I am authorizing a response mission. You will take a small fleet to Coalition space and make formal contact. Your orders are to assess the situation and provide limited assistance if appropriate." "How limited, ma'am?" "Use your best judgment," the president said. "But remember, you will be representing not just the Space Force but all of humanity. How we handle this will determine our place in the galaxy for generations to come." Jake felt the weight of that responsibility. "What ships will I have?" Admiral Sullivan answered. "The UES Liberty, UES Constitution, and UES Independence will join your task force. Each ship is being fitted with additional weapons and armor. We are also loading you with nuclear torpedoes, kinetic bombardment systems, and a full company of Space Marines." "Space Marines, ma'am?" "Just in case," General Rodriguez said grimly. "If these Vracath like to board ships and fight hand-to-hand, our Marines will give them a very unpleasant surprise." The briefing continued for another hour. Jake learned that Earth's top scientists were already working on ways to communicate with dozens of alien species. Diplomats were preparing for the most important first contact in human history, and military planners were studying Vracath tactics to find weaknesses. Finally, President Harrison stood up. "Captain Morrison, you have your orders. Godspeed, and remember that the entire human race is counting on you." As the transmission ended, Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was staring at him with expressions of excitement and fear. In 6 hours, they would be joined by 3 more ships and head out to meet aliens. Real aliens who needed their help. "Well," Jake said to his crew, "I guess we are about to find out what humans are really made of." Lisa was already working at her communication station. "Captain, should I prepare a response to the Coalition?" Jake thought for a moment. "What do you say to desperate aliens who have never met humans before? How do you explain that the species they contacted grew up fighting for survival on a world that tried to kill them every day?" "Send this message," Jake said. "Admiral Zephyr, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Navy. We received your request for assistance. We are coming to help. Be advised that humans are not like your coalition species. We evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill us. We learned to fight back. The Vrakith swarm is about to learn what happens when they threaten something humans decide to protect." The message was sent, traveling at light speed toward coalition space. In 3 days, Jake's small fleet would jump to faster-than-light travel and head out to fight aliens they had never seen before, alongside aliens they had never met, in a war that would determine the fate of the galaxy. As Jake sat back in his captain, the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of coalition space. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES horizon, looking at the view screen in amazement. Ahead of them floated the strangest ships he had ever seen. The coalition vessels looked like they were made of crystal and light. They curved and twisted in impossible shapes that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. Some ships looked like giant flowers made of metal and energy. Others resembled sea creatures with long tentacles trailing behind them. The largest ship in the fleet looked like a living mountain of glowing stone. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Lisa Chang from her communications station. "They are beautiful. They sure do not look like warships," said Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake. He was studying his tactical display with confusion. "I cannot find any obvious weapons on those vessels." Jake had to agree. The coalition ships looked more like art pieces than military vessels. They glowed with soft light and moved in graceful patterns that reminded him of a dance. His own ships, with their gray armor, plating, and bristling weapon systems, looked crude and dangerous by comparison. "Captain," Lisa said, "we are receiving a transmission from the lead coalition vessel." "Put it on screen," Jake ordered. The main view screen flickered, and suddenly Jake was looking at something that should not exist. Admiral Zephyr appeared before them, his crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns. He was clearly not human, but his presence was dignified and intelligent. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Zephyr said, his voice coming through the translation system. "Welcome to Coalition Space. I cannot express how grateful we are that you answered our call." Jake stepped forward, trying to look confident despite the strangeness of the situation. "Admiral Zephyr, I am honored to meet you. We came as soon as we could." Admiral Zephyr's crystalline form shifted colors, cycling through blue and green hues. "Your ships are unlike anything we have ever seen. They appear to be heavily armored and armed. Are all Terran vessels built for war?" Jake paused, realizing that this was a much more complicated question than it seemed. "Not all of them, Admiral. But we learned long ago that space can be dangerous. We build our ships to protect the people inside them." "Fascinating," Admiral Zephyr said. "Perhaps we should meet in person to discuss strategy. Would you be willing to come aboard my vessel? We have prepared an atmosphere that should be suitable for your species." Jake looked at Ryan, who nodded slightly. They had discussed this possibility during the journey. "I would be honored, Admiral. I will bring some of my officers with me." An hour later, Jake found himself in a shuttle heading toward the Coalition flagship. With him were Ryan Blake, Dr. Elizabeth Carter, the fleet's xenobiologist, and Commander Lisa Chang. As they approached the crystalline ship, Jake marveled at its size. It was easily 3 times larger than his biggest vessel. The shuttle bay they entered was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Instead of metal and machinery, the walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with gentle light. The air smelled like flowers and ozone. Everything was smooth and curved with no sharp edges anywhere. Admiral Zephyr met them personally, along with several other alien beings that took Jake's breath away. Dr. Kylera was there, her amphibious features both alien and somehow familiar. Her large eyes reflected intelligence and curiosity. Beside her stood General Crix, whose insect-like appearance should have been frightening, but somehow was not. "Welcome aboard the Harmony, Admiral," Zephyr said. "This is our flagship. Please follow me to our briefing chamber." As they walked through the ship's corridors, Jake noticed how everything seemed designed for peace and comfort. There were no weapons visible anywhere. The corridors were wide and filled with what looked like artwork from dozens of different species. Music played softly in the background, a mixture of sounds that somehow worked together perfectly. "Your ship is incredible," Dr. Carter said to Admiral Zephyr. "How do you power systems this large?" "We harness the energy of stars themselves," Admiral Zephyr replied. "Our technology focuses on creation and preservation, rather than destruction." They entered a large circular room with a table that seemed to be carved from a single piece of glowing stone. As they sat down, Jake noticed that the chairs adjusted themselves automatically to fit human bodies. "Now," Admiral Zephyr said, "perhaps you could tell us about your species and your capabilities." Jake looked around the table at the assembled aliens. "How do you explain humanity to beings who had never known war or violence?" "We come from a world called Earth," he began. "It is what you might call a dangerous place." Dr. Kalara leaned forward, her gill slits fluttering with interest. "How dangerous?" Dr. Carter pulled out a tablet and showed them pictures of Earth. "Our gravity is 3 times what most species consider normal. Our atmosphere contains gases that are toxic to many life forms. We have weather that can destroy cities, and our planet is covered with predators." The aliens looked at the images in amazement. General Crix clicked his mandibles together. "And intelligent life evolved in these conditions?" "Not just evolved," Jake said. "We thrived. We learned to hunt the predators that hunted us. We developed tools and weapons to survive. We built civilizations despite earthquakes, volcanoes, storms, and creatures that wanted to eat us." Admiral Zephyr's crystalline body flickered through several colors. "This explains much about your ships. You are accustomed to preparing for threats." "Speaking of threats," Ryan said, "can you tell us more about this Vracath swarm? What exactly are we dealing with?" General Crix activated a holographic display that showed the Vracath in detail. Jake and his officers stared at creatures that looked like nightmares made real. Giant insect-like beings with acid for blood and teeth like swords. Their ships were equally horrifying, looking more like living creatures than vehicles. "They appeared in our galaxy 2 years ago," General Crix explained. "They came from dark space between galaxies. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They consume everything organic and move on." "What weapons have you used against them?" Ryan asked. "Our standard energy arrays," Admiral Zephyr said. "Plasma containment fields, particle beam networks, and gravitational manipulation systems." Ryan looked confused. "What about kinetic weapons? Projectiles? Explosives?" The aliens exchanged looks. Dr. Kylara spoke up. "We do not understand. Why would you throw objects at enemy ships?" Jake realized they were dealing with a fundamental difference in thinking. "Dr. Carter, show them our weapons systems." Dr. Carter activated her tablet and displayed technical specifications for human weapons. "These are railguns. They fire metal projectiles at extremely high speeds. These are nuclear torpedoes. They create controlled explosions that release enormous amounts of energy." The aliens stared at the display in shocked silence. Finally, Admiral Zephyr spoke. "You weaponized controlled explosions?" "Among other things," Jake said. "We also use chemical weapons, biological weapons, kinetic bombardment, and electromagnetic pulse devices." General Crix's mandibles clicked, rapidly. "Your species developed all of these as defense against predators?" "And against each other," Jake admitted. "Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We got very good at it." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Jake worried that he had revealed too much about humanity's violent nature. But Admiral Zephyr's next words surprised him. "This is wonderful," the crystalline alien said. "The Vracath have never encountered weapons like yours. They have adapted to our energy-based systems, but they have no defense against physical projectiles or nuclear explosions." Dr. Kylara was studying the human weapon specifications with growing excitement. "Your species thinks in terms of offense rather than defense. This is completely alien to us, but it might be exactly what we need." "There is something else," Ryan said. "Our Marines are trained for close combat. If these Vracath like to board ships and fight hand-to-hand, they are going to get a very unpleasant surprise." Jake activated his communicator. "Sergeant Kevin Murphy, report to the briefing room in full combat gear." A few minutes later, a space marine entered the room. Sergeant Murphy was a large man wearing advanced combat armor and carrying an assault rifle. He looked like something from a war movie, which was exactly the effect Jake wanted. The alien stared at the marine in fascination and fear. Dr. Kylara's gill slits fluttered rapidly. "Is this a typical human warrior?" "One of our best," Jake said proudly. "Sergeant Murphy has been trained to fight in any environment against any enemy. He can operate in vacuum, underwater, in extreme heat or cold, and in toxic atmospheres." Sergeant Murphy stood at attention, looking every inch the professional soldier. "Sir, how can I assist?" "Show our allies your equipment, Sergeant." Murphy began demonstrating his weapons and armor. He showed them his rifle, which could fire different types of ammunition depending on the situation. He displayed his combat knife, designed for close-quarters fighting. He explained his armor systems, which could protect him from energy weapons, projectiles, and environmental hazards. "And this is just one soldier?" General Crix asked. "We have millions like him," Jake said. "Our military training focuses on adaptability, aggression, and never giving up. We do not retreat when outnumbered. We do not surrender when outgunned. We find a way to win." The warning came 3 days after the humans and coalition forces had finished their planning. Long-range sensors detected the Vracath swarm moving toward Sanctuary Prime, the coalition's most important fortress system. Admiral Zephyr called an emergency meeting aboard his flagship. "They are coming," he announced to the mixed group of human and alien officers. 2,000 bioships heading straight for us. They will arrive in 18 hours. Captain Jake Morrison studied the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. The Vracath ships looked like a living nightmare spreading across space. Each vessel was a creature the size of a skyscraper, with teeth, claws, and acid weapons. They moved together like a school of hungry sharks. "How many ships do we have?" Jake asked. General Crix answered, his mandibles clicking nervously. 800 coalition vessels and your 4 human ships." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake looked up from his own tactical screen. "So we are outnumbered 5-1 by creatures that have been destroying your fleets for 2 years. "That is correct," Admiral Zephyr said. His crystalline body was cycling through dark, worried colors. "But we have never fought alongside humans before. Your weapons are completely different from anything the Vracath have faced." Jake nodded and activated his communicator. "All human ships, this is Captain Morrison. Prepare for combat operations, load all nuclear torpedoes and arm kinetic weapon systems. Marines, prepare for possible boarding actions." Dr. Kylara was monitoring the approaching swarm with her advanced sensors. "Captain Morrison, the Vracath are moving faster than usual. They seem excited about something, probably looking forward to their dinner," Ryan said grimly. "They think we are just another easy meal." Admiral Zephyr moved to the center of the command room. "All coalition forces, assume defensive formation Harmony 7. Prepare energy shields for maximum dispersal." Jake watched as the coalition ships moved into their traditional battle formation. They arranged themselves in a beautiful pattern that looked like a flower made of light. Each ship's position was calculated to create overlapping energy fields that could protect the entire fleet. "Admiral," Jake said, "with respect, that formation puts all your ships in one place. It makes you an easy target for mass attack. But it maximizes our defensive capabilities," Admiral Zephyr replied. "We can combine our shields to protect against their acid weapons." Jake looked at Ryan, who shook his head slightly. The humans had studied Vracath tactics during their journey to Coalition space. The aliens always used the same approach. Swarm the enemy with overwhelming numbers and dissolve their ships with concentrated acid attacks. "Admiral, may I suggest a different approach?" Jake asked. "Of course, Captain." Jake activated the tactical display and began drawing new formations. "Spread your ships out in small groups. Make the Vracath chase you instead of letting them concentrate their attack. My ships will position ourselves between your forces and the enemy." Admiral Zephyr's crystalline form flickered with confusion. "But that puts your ships in the most dangerous position. You will face the full force of their assault." Jake smiled, and several of the aliens had learned to recognize that particular human expression. It usually meant something was about to explode. "Admiral, trust me. Humans know how to handle bullies. 18 hours later, the Vracath swarm arrived at Sanctuary Prime. The creatures came out of faster-than-light travel in a massive wave that blotted out the stars. Their bioships screamed and roared as they detected the Coalition fleet, making sounds that traveled through space by some alien method. Admiral Zephyr stood on his bridge, surrounded by his officers. All ships, prepare for defensive operations. Activate shields and belay that order. Jake's voice cut through the communication system. All Coalition forces, scatter according to the Morrison pattern. Do not engage until you see what happens next. The Coalition ships, despite their fears, followed the humans' instructions. They spread out across the system in small groups, leaving the 4 human vessels alone between them and the advancing swarm. The Vracath saw the isolated human ships and roared with pleasure. These small, ugly vessels looked like easy prey. The entire swarm focused on the humans and charged forward, acid weapons preparing to fire. On the bridge of the UES horizon, Jake watched the enemy approach with calm eyes. Range to target? 50,000 kilometers in closing, Ryan reported. All ships weapons free. Fire when ready. What happened next changed galactic warfare forever. The UES Liberty fired first. A nuclear torpedo streaked across space toward the leading Vracath bioship. The creature saw the incoming projectile and tried to dissolve it with acid spray, just as it had done with energy weapons for 2 years. The nuclear warhead detonated, on contact. The explosion lit up space like a miniature sun. The leading Vracath, a kilometer-long creature that had devoured 3 worlds, simply ceased to exist. The nuclear fire expanded outward, catching 2 more bioships and turning them into ash and radiation. For a moment, the entire swarm stopped moving. They had never seen anything like this. Their acid weapons were useless against the fusion fire that consumed their fellow creatures. Then the railguns opened fire. The UES Constitution launched a barrage of metal projectiles moving at 20% of light speed. The tungsten rounds punched through bioarmor that had shrugged off energy weapons for centuries. Each projectile contained no explosives, no energy, just pure kinetic force delivered with precision. The Vracath bioships began, exploding as the railgun rounds tore through their internal organs. Acid blood sprayed across space as creatures that had been unstoppable nightmares died in agony. On Admiral Zephyr's bridge, the Coalition officers watched in stunned silence as the human fleet carved through the Vracath advance like a hot knife. Through ice cream. Impossible, whispered Dr. Kylera. They are destroying creatures that have eaten our fleets. Look at their weapons, General Crick said, his voice filled with awe. They are not using energy at all, pure kinetic force and controlled nuclear explosions. The Vracath tried to adapt. They launched their boarding pods toward the human ships, intending to swarm aboard and devour the crews as they had done so many times before. The pods were living creatures themselves, designed to bite through hull armor and release swarms of smaller Vracath into enemy ships. They had never met Space Marines before. Sergeant Kevin Murphy stood in the airlock of the UES horizon as the first boarding pod attached itself to the hull. Behind him, 20 Marines waited in full combat armor. Their weapons were loaded with explosive rounds designed specifically for fighting in the confined spaces of a starship. Remember, boys, Murphy said into his helmet radio. These things have been eating peaceful aliens for 2 years. Time to show them what happens when they try to eat something that bites back. The boarding pod burned through the hull, and a swarm of dog-sized Vracath poured into the ship. They expected to find frightened aliens hiding behind energy barriers. Instead, they found humans who had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting predators. The Marines opened fire with automatic weapons that filled the corridor with explosive rounds. Fragmentation grenades turned Vracath swarms into green paste. Flamethrowers cleared entire sections of ship in seconds. The Vracath had never encountered prey that fought back with such violence and efficiency. They tried to retreat, but Marines do not let enemies escape. They followed the aliens back into their own boarding pods and continued the fight inside the bioships themselves. In space, the battle was turning into a massacre. The human fleet moved through the Vracath swarm like death itself. Nuclear torpedoes turned bioships into radioactive clouds. Railgun rounds punched holes through creatures that had terrorized the galaxy. The Coalition forces watched in amazement as their saviors demonstrated the difference between a civilization that had learned to fight and creatures that had only learned to hunt. All Coalition ships, Jake's voice came over the radio. Begin your attack runs. Hit them while they are confused. The crystalline ships of the Coalition fleet swept in from all directions. Their energy weapons, which had been nearly useless against healthy Vraketh, now found targets that were wounded and disoriented. The aliens finally got their revenge against the creatures that had destroyed their worlds. But it was clear who was doing the real damage. Every minute, more nuclear explosions lit up space as human weapons found their targets. The elegant dance of Coalition ships was beautiful, but the brutal efficiency of human warfare was what won the battle. Admiral Zephyr watched as a creature that had personally devoured his homeworld died in nuclear fire. "Captain Morrison," he said over the radio, "your species is terrifying." Jake's reply came with that dangerous human smile in his voice. "Admiral, we are not terrifying. We are just very good at protecting our friends." The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the unstoppable Vraketh swarm was running for their lives. 2/3 of their bioships were dead, floating in space as frozen chunks of alien meat. The survivors fled toward dark space, broadcasting fear signals that other Vraketh would understand as a warning. On the bridge of the UES horizon, Jake looked at the tactical display showing the retreating enemy. "All ships stand down from combat alert. Let them run. They will spread the word about what happens when you threaten human allies." 2 weeks after the battle that destroyed the Vraketh swarm, the greatest gathering in galactic history took place aboard the Coalition flagship Harmony. Representatives from 43 different species filled the massive assembly hall. But all eyes were on the small group of humans sitting at the center table. Captain Jake Morrison looked around the room at creatures he was still learning to understand. There was Admiral Zephyr, his crystalline body now glowing with bright, hopeful colors. Dr. Kylara sat nearby, her large amphibious eyes reflecting wonder and gratitude. General Crix clicked his mandibles in what Jake had learned was the mantoid, equivalent of applause. President Helen Harrison had arrived from Earth 3 days earlier aboard the diplomatic vessel UES Enterprise. She sat beside Jake, looking calm, despite the enormous responsibility on her shoulders. This meeting would decide humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. "Friends," Admiral Zephyr began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall through translation devices. "We gathered today to welcome our saviors into the Galactic Coalition. The humans of Earth have shown us possibilities we never imagined." A wave of agreement rippled through the assembled aliens. Soft musical tones came from the energy beings. The plant-like Verdani rustled their leaves in approval. Even the normally silent rock creatures made grinding sounds that indicated pleasure. Dr. Kylara stood up to speak. "Before the humans arrived, we thought intelligence naturally led to peace. We believed that any species smart enough to reach the stars would choose cooperation over conflict. The humans have taught us that sometimes intelligence means knowing when to fight." President Harrison rose from her seat. She had spent the past 2 weeks learning about alien customs and protocols, but she decided to speak from the heart instead of following diplomatic scripts. "Honored representatives," she began, "we are grateful for your welcome, but I want you to understand something important. Humans did not choose to become warriors. Our world made us this way. Every day on Earth was a test of survival." She activated a holographic display that showed images of Earth. Beautiful landscapes filled with dangerous predators, violent storms, and natural disasters that could kill millions. "We learned to cooperate because we had to. No human could survive alone against the creatures and dangers of our world. We learned to fight because everything else on our planet was trying to eat us. We developed weapons because the alternative was extinction." The aliens listened in fascination as President Harrison explained humanity's history. How early humans had lived in caves to hide from predators. How they had learned to make fire to drive away the creatures of the night. How they had developed tools and weapons to hunt animals much larger and stronger than themselves. But most importantly, President Harrison continued, We learned that the strongest survive not by being the biggest or the most dangerous, but by working together and protecting each other. General Crick stood up, his insect-like form towering over the assembly. President Harrison, your species has given us a gift beyond measure. You have shown us that there are different kinds of intelligence. We developed technology to create and preserve. You developed technology to protect and defend. Admiral Zephyr's crystalline body shifted to warm golden colors. The coalition has voted unanimously. We invite humanity to join us not as junior members but as full partners. More than that, we ask you to become our protectors. A murmur of excitement went through the human delegation. Jake felt a mixture of pride and responsibility. Earth was being offered a place among the stars, but it came with the job of being the galaxy's guardians. What exactly does that mean? President Harrison asked. Dr. Kylara answered. It means that when peaceful species are threatened by aggression, we call on Earth. When diplomacy fails and force becomes necessary, we ask humans to stand with us. In return, we share all our technology, knowledge, and resources. The next several hours were spent working out the details of what would become known as the Terran Protection Treaty. Earth would establish military bases throughout coalition space. Human officers would train alien security forces in defensive tactics. In exchange, coalition scientists would share their advanced technology with humanity. What about the Vraketh? Jake asked. The ones that escaped will probably return eventually. Admiral Zephyr's colors shifted to serious blues and grays. Our long-range sensors have detected them retreating to the edge of the galaxy. They appear to be regrouping, but they are no longer advancing. Your demonstration has given them pause, President. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. We will need to prepare for their return, but this time, we will be ready, and we will not be fighting alone. The formal ceremony took place the next day. President Harrison signed the treaty alongside representatives from every coalition species. The document was written in 44 different languages and formats, including some that existed only as patterns of light or vibrations in crystal. As the signing concluded, Jake found himself standing with Admiral Zephyr on the observation deck of the Harmony. Through the transparent walls, they could see Earth's small fleet alongside the massive coalition vessels. Admiral, Jake said, I have to ask, are you sure about this? Bringing humans into the galaxy changes everything. We are not like you. We solve problems with force when necessary. Admiral Zephyr's crystalline form pulsed with calm, steady light. Captain Morrison, 3 weeks ago, my people were facing extinction. Today, children are playing safely on a dozen worlds that would have been consumed by the Vraketh. Yes, you solve problems with force, but you only use that force to protect innocent life. Jake thought about that. What if we change? What if having all this power corrupts us? Then we will stop you, Admiral Zephyr said simply. Just as you stopped the Vraketh. That is what allies do. They help each other become better. Dr. Kylara joined them on the observation deck. Captain Morrison, may I ask you something? When your species first received our message, why did you decide to help? You could have ignored us or decided we were not your problem. Jake considered the question carefully. Dr. Kylara, humans have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. When we learned that innocent beings were being murdered, we could not just stand by and watch. Even though you had never met us? Even though we were aliens to you? Especially because of that, Jake said. If we only protected our own species, what would that make us? Just another kind of predator. The months that followed saw changes that transformed both human and alien civilizations. Exchange programs brought human military advisors to peaceful worlds that had never known war. At the same time, coalition scientists shared technologies that advanced Earth by centuries. Dr. Elizabeth Carter led a team studying alien medical technology. Within 6 months, diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia were being cured, with devices no larger than a pen. Human engineers worked with Thylorian crystal shapers to develop new kinds of starships that combined human durability with alien elegance. The most significant changes happened in how both sides thought about conflict and cooperation. Coalition species learned that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was to stop evil with overwhelming force. Humans learned that there were problems that could not be solved with weapons, and that wisdom sometimes meant knowing when not to fight. 1 year after first contact, Jake stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, now flagship of the Terran Protection Fleet. His ships patrolled Coalition space, ensuring that peaceful worlds could continue their quiet lives without fear. "Captain," his communications officer called out, "we are receiving a distress signal from the Antares system. Unknown vessels are attacking civilian ships." Jake smiled grimly. It was not the Vraketh this time, but some other predatory species that thought they could prey on peaceful aliens. They were about to learn the same lesson the Vraketh had learned. All ships set course for Antares, maximum speed. As the human fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, Jake reflected on how much had changed. A year ago, humanity had been alone in the universe. Now they were part of something much bigger. They had found their place among the stars not as conquerors but as protectors. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of predators and threats that peaceful species could not handle alone. But it was also a place of wonder, beauty, and cooperation that humans had never imagined possible. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the surviving Vraketh told stories to their young about the death world called Terra. They spoke of creatures that looked soft and weak but fought with nuclear fire and metal projectiles. They warned about the species that had turned the galaxy's greatest predators into prey. The stories always ended the same way. "Stay away from the third planet of the Terra system. The creatures there do not run from monsters. They are the monsters that monsters run from." But the humans knew better. They were not monsters. They were something much more dangerous to those who threatened innocent life. They were protectors who had learned that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be very, very good at war. And in the vast galaxy full of wonders and dangers, that made all the difference.